So I was lecturing in the theology department at Columbia Evening College in Washington, D.C. Part-time. I was also the ministerial director of the whole union, the Columbia Union. Anyway, I started up a group on spiritual gifts. I ran it in the evening so we could attract people from the community. And the first night, an interesting group of students on one hand and people from the community on the other hand showed up. And one of the women who showed up was totally outside the box. I mean, she was not a young woman. She had to be in her 60s. That was my guesstimate. And she drove into the parking lot of the religion building in an MG Sports convertible, which in Washington, D.C. is certainly outside the box. You know, Washington is one of those conservative cities where even the wealthiest people drive the dingiest cars you'd never have any money, you know. Whereas New York is a flashy place. You go and California also a flashy place. They like to be seen in their fancy cars, but not in Washington. So this woman drove in a little sports convertible, and I said to myself, she's different. And as she walked into the classroom, I noticed that she was different in more ways than ever because she had flowers everywhere. She had a little hat on with a bouquet of flowers in it. She had flowers here. I mean, I said, wow, she's like a walking florist shop, you know, this woman. And these were real flowers, you know, not artificial flowers, which I found rather fascinating. And it was really exciting to see this woman begin to bloom. And so I said to the students, you know, we had a whole table of students at one table like this, and I said, take this woman in and look after her because she seems out of her depth there. Anyway, after the first night, this woman came up to me and she said, I appreciate you taking me into the class. She said, this is my last desperate attempt to find some gifts in me that could be useful to the church because I've been in the church for 40 years and no one has ever recognized anything useful in me yet. I've never been asked to do anything, imagine that in 40 years.
Wow.
Never been asked to take any position, do anything for the church. And she said, I saw this class advertised and I thought, well, this is my last attempt. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I'm not sure if I have any reason to keep on living. That's what she said to me. Because I'm 40 years and I've never been useful to anybody yet. I said, well, I can tell you what, if you will agree to hang in, to postpone whatever you're thinking till the end of the class, I will promise you that by the end of this class, you will not only have gifts recognized and affirmed in you by the people at your table, but you will feel a calling into ministry by God. And you will discover for the first time in your life a usefulness to the body of Christ. Oh, she said, do you really think so? I said, absolutely. So it was just so exciting as she began to grow, you know. And this group of students, I've got to give them credit, they took her in, they loved this little lady. I mean, she looked like Ellen White resurrected, you know. Except she had more flowers on her. The students loved her, they ran up and hugged her the moment she arrived, they took her into their little group and treated her like one of the family. You know, I was so proud of them. Because it was also a part of their learning experience to do this too, because we were learning how to build a body as well as to see the gifts. I told you at the beginning, nobody discovers gifts without attachment to a body. Anyway, we got well into the semester, the second last night of the class. And she walked into the classroom, not just with the usual garden varieties. Now, the flowers she had here were actually growing. They weren't just in water. They were in little pots, you know. Everything was growing.
Oh, wow.
And she walked into class with an armful of flowers, especially irises. I'm very fond of irises. And she said, would you mind if I gave a testimony? I said, of course not, Ruth. Go ahead. And so she handed out a flower to everybody, and she gave me an iris. And she said to me, Pastor, would you mind if I use you as my model tonight? I said, no, feel free. I'm a great lover of flowers anyway. You know? And so in front of the whole class, she took me step by step down inside an iris. And she pulled the leaves back. We got right down until I'm looking right down inside. I don't know if you've ever done this in an iris, you should try it. I'm looking right down into the very depths of the iris, and she says to me, now, are you seeing anything of interest right there? I said, no, I'm seeing stamens, I'm seeing petals, I'm seeing... No, she said, look deeper down. And this took like 15 minutes for me to get right inside the iris. Oh, I said, yes, I see it. She said, what do you see? I said, well, I see a face, and it seems to be laughing at me. Well, she got that excited. She said, every iris has a face in it. Wow. And it's always grinning at you. And she said, that is God's way of revealing to him that he has a marvelous sense of humor. I've never forgotten it to this day, my discovery of God's sense of humor inside a flower. Now, it made a profound impression on the whole room. So in the final night of class where we were identifying gifts and ministries, little Ruth stood up and she said, you know, God has placed a calling on me into ministry. God, hallelujah, praise. Did I not predict that you would not only discover gifts, but you would have a calling into ministry? I said, I can hardly wait, because all the things are identifying what ministries that you're called into. And little Ruth stands up and she said, God is calling me into a beholding ministry. I said, well, I knew it would be different, so what is a beholding ministry? And she said, well, I want to go out to the churches and work mainly with young people and young adults and teach them how to behold the beautiful characteristics of God through the natural world, you know. And so she started a ministry, and I started spreading the word again in a lot of churches in Washington, D.C. So I started spreading the word among all the churches that you can book this woman for a Sabbath afternoon experience of about 2 hours. And she'll take a group out, and she will teach them to behold the beauty of God's character. And she started getting in demand, and you'd see her tripping around town in a little convertible full of flowers and things, and she'd take groups out into the Beltway Parkway and all those beautiful places around Washington. And anyway, about 2 years later, when she'd become very well known in Washington, and she came to me one day and she said, you know, the last 2 years of my life have been the most fulfilling and beautiful years of my life, because for the first time I have felt needed and used by the body. I said, praise the Lord. And just a few weeks later, she was out driving around the city in her little MG, and she had a fatal heart attack at the wheel and passed away. And I gave her testimony at her funeral. I said, you know, every now and again in life, you run into somebody who has spent 40 years without feeling any need, without ever being put to work, and for the last 2 years, here is a woman who had utmost fulfillment, because her gift was to lead people to see the beauty of the character of God through the natural world. And so this was my beginning of my journey really into spiritual gifts, where I began to realize that you can't discount anybody. They may not look as though they've got much to offer, but as they develop and they become a functioning part of the body, you see the beauty of what God has given them begin to emerge. So there you have your story. Then I end up and have a circle.
And I promise that will never happen in your life.